includes partners, clients, regulators, essentially sovereign wealth funds almost. Because as the chief financial officer, I'm usually kept a long way away from all of these people. So, and we were just talking in the room next door. I was sharing a story about my communications training, where the communications trainer kindly said to me at the beginning of the training that, remember, with every panel or interview, you are 5 minutes away from the end of your career. So, I'm sort of setting that scene. But one thing to be really aware of is that as a panel, we had a pre-call. And the idea behind the pre-call and the sentiment expressed by all the panelists is, we want a conversation. We want to have a discussion, a debate, recognizing the protocols and the rules and the world that we live in, so within sensible bounds, but to have a conversation, to have a dialogue, to have a back and forth. But that also means that you, the audience, are involved. So I know it's tempting to sit here, to get out your iPhone, to catch up on your emails. But my colleagues know that usually if I spot somebody doing that, that's the person I decide to ask for a question. That's the person I'll say, and this is the subject, do you agree? And I'm intentionally trying to find the person that has not been listening. So you are here, you're about to invest almost 90 minutes of your life in this session. You never get this time back. So that's got to be something you want to invest in that is really useful, that you're engaged. We're going to have a discussion. We've got some questions to stimulate debate, and then I will open it up for Q&A. So know that my expectation is questions from the audience. And the joy of the microphones is I'm not actually mic'd up. I can walk around. So I will walk around and find the one individual I think has been studying their iPhone for the last 75 minutes and say, what's your view on technology and innovation for the future? So be prepared, be ready, think about the question you really want to get answered, because we have an extraordinary panel in front of you. That's why I said I'm actually feeling quite privileged. I'm also feeling quite intimidated because I'm looking at the expertise amongst the four, and I get to do this. I get to say, I know the least amount about this topic, so no answer I have to provide, but these four people are experts in their area. Now, I'm not going to read out their resumes. You all have the ability as clever professionals to go online, but if you look them up, you'll see that careers of success, careers of accomplishment, careers of responsibility and governance and duty and commitment. But I'm just going to quickly introduce their names and their titles, and if you'll allow me, limit it to that. But I'm being very concise intentionally, and I've asked their permission to do that. So right next to me here is Mr. Lo Chin-hua, who is the CEO and Executive Director of Keppel. Next to him is Daryl Chan, Deputy Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. Then I have Nargiz Nazrullayeva from Azerbaijan. Nargiz is on the AIB's International Advisory Panel, but a long list of other accomplishments and involvement. And then lastly, Mr. Jinhua Bing, or Frank. I'm going to do Frank the disservice and say he is our resident technology expert. Now, some people would say geek. I didn't say that, but get ready for a question. You must have a curiosity about AI, and you must have a curiosity about the future. So let's dive right in. So Daryl, So just so you know, I'm giving Daryl a very softball question that he's expecting, but he's also expecting me to maybe twist a little bit of the knife and see if I can catch him out. All right. So all of you will be aware of the vital role of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, also its impact, also probably a little bit of a sense of the size, but maybe not totally a sense of the size, because appropriately it's uses an appropriate measure about what information it shares. But let's give you a very softball question to start with, Daryl. So the softball question is, given the role of HKMA, and given that this session is all around technology, innovation, investing for the future, can you give us specific examples or measures around innovation where HKMA's had policies or actions in order to support that?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I don't envy your job because it seems that while moderating, you also need to keep track of who's looking at their mobile phone. So it's quite challenging. So in terms of innovation, so innovation is always a key part of our work. Now, people tend to think that, well, if you're looking in a central bank, then basically you want to make sure that you have the right monetary policy. Although we don't, we leave it to DC in terms of having the peg. So the monetary policy is actually, we follow the US interest rate. But having said that, there are still a lot of things on the financial stability side of things to want to make sure that the financial system is sound and safe and stable. So that's one thing. But at the same time, we also see the need, actually, if you as a financial center, you always need to stay ahead and look ahead. So innovation is not just in the sense of technology, but it's also innovation in how you look at things, how you organize your work, and how you think the future will hold in terms of things under your watch. Let me just give you a few examples. So now we're talking about green and investment and that sort of thing. I used to remember I joined the HKMA about 12 years ago. At the time of joining, there was actually barely any mention of green finance, green investment. But up to a certain point, people thought this is a very important area. And it started off not just from the perspective of investment, but it's more about climate risk. So when we talk about climate risk, how that will impact the financial system, and in our case, as a banking regulator, is more about the stability of the banking system. How you look at the risk, or climate risk more specifically, the banks face. And okay, assume that there will be the risk. How are we going to mitigate the risk? And apart from we as the regulator impose expectations or regulations, how we can also help banks internalize their climate risk management in terms of the strategy, setting goals, disclosure. So it's not something that all of a sudden you have a playbook to follow. You will have to work with banks. One typical example is that when we look at climate risk, we want banks to do stress testing about their climate risk. But at that point, no one had any idea how a climate risk stress test should be done. So in a way, it's in the process that we work together with the banks and then try to come up with the different kind of scenarios. Some of them more general, and some of them may be more peculiar to the Hong Kong situation. So in a way, we co-develop the stress test scenario and how we measure the impact on them. And then the next thing would be, okay, you get the results. What are you going to do with it? And then whether there are, in terms of managing climate risk, is anything that in terms of best practice you can share among banks? Because various banks would have different levels of development in terms of managing their own climate risk. So I just wanted to give you an example that when it comes to innovation, it's not just about technology. But of course, if you want to discuss that, the crypto asset space, stable coin or whatever, I'm more than happy to talk about that as well. And then AI, then definitely. But I just want to highlight the point that for central bank institution, it's not just the innovation per se, but it's more also to do with your mindsets and how to change or reform your institution to live with the changing world.
Daryl, thank you. I'm now not going to ask a softball question to Chin-Hua. So my question would be, if you think about HKMA, you could well argue that the timescale that HKMA is thinking about is a very long timescale. If I'm thinking about Keppel, returns to investors, financial results, I once had a conversation with a banker in my office, and he was talking about long-term, and I was talking about long-term, and then I realized his long-term was 3 months, and my long-term was 25 years. So from Keppel's perspective, how do you find the balance that inevitably there's a tension between your timetable, and with innovation also comes failure. So you're not going to have perfect success. So the normal question would be for me to say, can you talk about your innovation successes? Maybe without necessarily going, can you talk to me about your innovation failures? But can you share what the lessons have been you've learned from not having a perfect track record on innovation, which would be absolutely normal?
So first and foremost, Keppel is, for many decades, has been a industrial conglomerate. The more recent years, we've transformed ourselves into a global asset manager and operator. We have not forsaken our industrial roots. In fact, quite the opposite. We have taken advantage of the fact that we have a very long experience and history in building, designing, operating specialized assets like desalination plants, waste-to-energy plants, data centers, etc., to transform ourselves. Now we are a global asset manager. We manage about 88 billion in funds under management. And the key differentiator between us and our peers is that we actually still have an engineering DNA. So we tend to look at things and then seeing the problems, create solutions, and then see how we can actually find the solutions. And often, these solutions also lends itself to investments by investors, such as AIIB, HKMA, etc. So to your point, I think maybe I recount a recent experience that we have, right? I won't call it a failure, but I think it just shows how quickly things change. Like most enterprises, we have been toying with AI over the last 3-4 years. I think for the first part, we were doing a lot of sandbox. Let the organization decide for themselves what they want to do within guardrails. Then about 18 months ago, we decided enough of that. We want to try to leverage AI at the enterprise level. And so we created a group and we started looking at this at the enterprise level. And we were quite ambitious. We wanted, being a GP, we wanted to create an agent, an AI agent that can help us prepare papers for our investment committees. But not prepare papers in just summarizing it, but more to analyze the deal as how the team would analyze it, right? So we gave the team a task to get it ready. We have a technology day. I think it was 6 months from when we gave that instruction. And the team worked really, really hard across, not just on the people who are involved in data and AI, etc., but also with the investment team, the people that know and how this is going to be used. And we came out with a prototype, and everyone was quite happy with it. We showcased it in our technology day, and we had a couple of our large LPs join us, including GIC, and they were so taken by it. They said, wow, what a great agent, that model, that AI model that you have created. And they actually sent teams to study what we've done. But that was a prototype. Then when we came, we said, okay, let's now go into production. Then we realized that, oh my goodness, we are quite focused on only using, at that point, Gen AI, right? ChatGPT. And we found that the cost was quite high. So each report or each things that we're going to do was going to cost about $300 for each query, right? And if you're going to democratize it, you want to have all the people or number of people in Keppel use this, the cost can be quite prohibitive. So then we decided, so now we have gone, that was probably version 1, now we're into version 3 or 4, and now we have a way of being able to use different large language models, small language models, depending on what the task is required, so that we can, so the point is that you do something fast, your prototype is what you developed it to be, but the actual final product is not going to be like your prototype. And this is not uncommon when things are moving so quickly. So I guess that would be one lesson that I'll share.
Thank you. Frank, if I pick up the comment here, which you could say it's the combination of Keppel's engineering DNA and what I think is the agile mindset that's required in innovation and technology. So if you look at the panel, it's titled Sustainable Infrastructure. So if you think about AI and data centers, is there an argument which is everybody seems to want their own data center? But if you actually wanted to build sustainable infrastructure, you would have a small number of data centers that everybody shares. But then where do you locate them? How do you power them? What's the impact on the grid? How do you think about water? And do we actually know what we're building with AI?
Yeah. Actually, AI is the most magic innovation in the last few years, right? They really use a lot of power, use a lot of computing energy, right? So I think when we build AI, when we sell, a lot of enterprise, want to invest in AI in data centers, but these kind of data centers, how to use it efficiently, how to make the full use of these data centers is a key. I think it's a key factor we have to consider. We as a Tencent, we have a full stack of the technology to make AI, make data centers more efficient and more more productive. And also, I think when we're talking about the AI, the output of the AI, how to like the investment, like the price, the costing. I think this when we talking about the approach, the enterprise adopting AI technology to generate their business outcomes, there are two approaches. One is more cost-effective, and another one and most costly. And so agentic AI approach is for now is the most cost-effective, I think. And we how to say that? I think you can also use AI in data center operations, in the maintenance, and also these kind of things to minimize the balance. The AI, the energy consumption and output, I think. Yeah.
Can I? Yeah, if I could just add to what Frank have said. I think 2 points. I think AI being used by the enterprise is still very early days, and particularly for small, medium enterprises. And I think once you have this cost of AI is brought down, cost not just in terms of financial costs, but also the cost related to energy, you know, to the carbon that it creates, water, you know, as we mentioned earlier. I think you will see a mass adoption by enterprises. And I think that's where we will start to see AI truly being democratized, not just being used by individuals, but by enterprises. And I think Frank and I have been talking about this. And these are two areas that Keppel is and Tencent are very focused on. But on your earlier question to Frank about large-scale data centers, I don't think it's small data centers. Our thesis is quite different. We think that rather than have a number of smaller data centers, there's now a trend towards moving these data centers, aggregating them, and creating data center parks. We've seen some in northern China as well. When you aggregate these data centers together in a location, then it's much easier to provide microgrids. You can provide renewable energy. You can provide district cooling, which is more efficient way of cooling. You can also provide, seawater cooling. So for Keppel, we are also going to very soon be on FID to do a floating data center in Singapore, where one of the key innovation is that we're going to use seawater to cool instead of potable water. So, and you can do that more efficiently with a data center park than, you know, when you spread the data centers around.
All right, let me use that as the catalyst for Nargiz. So, Nargiz, the accusation in infrastructure is that infrastructure has been very slow at adopting technology. I don't know if that's true or not. I've never seen any data to reinforce it, but it's a slightly inflammatory remark to get you going anyway. So, based on your experience about what gets in the way, what would be great is if you can give us a sense of what gets in the way, but what have you also seen that breaks the logjam? So what cuts the Gordian knot?
Thank you very much. Well, from my experience of the American Chamber of Commerce representing the private sector and also with the government, with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, when it comes to specifically technology in infrastructure, what I think is the most persistent bottlenecks are not technological. They're actually institutional and regulatory. When we talk about the private sector, we are talking about financial and technological constraints that with sufficient capital and sufficient effort and investment in innovation, you can overcome. When we're talking about cross-border infrastructure or infrastructure in general, that is where I have seen in my experience that especially in emerging markets, you have the ecosystems that are simply not ready to absorb, scale, or even procure the technological innovations. We have seen companies that would have, that try to navigate the digital transformation in utilities or in transportation. But because of the regulatory inertia or an overly rigid public procurement, they would never actually deploy. We've seen the cases when you have international vendors would bring advanced metering systems or the waste management systems, but it just wouldn't take off in a scale that would make a difference. We have, there are two specific examples I can use, again, from mainly my geography. I'm originally from Azerbaijan. One was a very promising project it was called South Caucasus Power Market project, where with the help of international donors like the European Union, the plan was to increase the grid capacity and renewable energy trade between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. There was a particular technology that was involved, like the smart grid systems, the digital load forecasting platforms, but it never actually scaled up for very basic reasons. The regulatory and reasons, the fact that all three countries used different transmission codes and they had different market rules. The institutional silos, the fact that the grid operators lacked mandate, but sometimes even motivation to jointly look into upgrades of their systems. And then in this particular case, there was a cybersecurity concerns because the cross-country digital integration came as a concern to the national security of the countries. Another example was the middle corridor that I know that the AIB is also looking at. That was also a project about connecting Central Asia to Europe via Port of Baku, and the attempt was to digitize the logistic flows. But again, because of the similar reasons, the fact that the customs authorities of the countries involved, the customs authorities of Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkey used different IT systems, or because the legacy port and railway operators, they simply lacked that agility to be able to work with with tech providers. In that particular case, there was also a problem, again, talking about scaling, that there was no anchor demand, so none of the tech vendors could actually prove the ROE because there was an inconsistent or low demand. And this is where I think the MDBs in general and AIB in particular have a unique position to help bridge that trust and capacity. So the way to do it is, well, in terms of the regulatory constraints, is help the countries to harmonize their grids, or harmonize their rules and regulations at least. The second one is definitely to have funding along with capacity. So don't just fund the project. You have to bring your funding alongside with technical assistance, especially when it comes to grid operators or to the utility companies, to state-owned companies. So I think that the funding has to go along with publicity building. Third would be perhaps to publicize the good cases. So I know that AIB has the Infratech platform. It's a very good start, but there is more room for that, because this is what increases trust. Especially, again, we're talking about, my distinguished colleagues talked about quite high-end. I think Southeast Asia is much ahead of the Central Asia, Caucasus, the emerging markets. So my perspective is a little bit more to that part of the world.
All right. So, Frank, to give you fair warning, but I'm going to come to Daryl first. So I'm going to blatantly misinterpret what Nargiz just said. So, Daryl, I think I heard Nargiz say that because poor regulation, too tight regulation, too constraining regulation, you, HKMA, are standing in the way of necessary innovation and sustainable infrastructure. And Frank, I think I heard her say that because of poor technology and bad data and inconsistent data standards, Tencent is letting us down when it comes to building sustainable infrastructure. So, Daryl, tell me why I'm wrong, and then Frank, if you want to come in afterwards, because I somehow doubt you're going to agree with me.
Okay. So at the very beginning, you mentioned you went through a communications training.
And my question is, actually, when you were trained as a reporter or more from an official responding to reporter? That's my question. But anyway, I think when it comes to, again, to innovation, if I may just use the example of crypto or digital assets that a lot of people have been talking about. In our context is stablecoin, for example. So there's something emerging from the market. The central banking community didn't create this. In a way, as you said, I mean, you're standing in the way because there are when new things emerge, then there'll always be risk. So by nature, we probably won't really wholeheartedly like innovations like this. But I think it's also important that when we look at these kind of emerging trends or new solutions or possibilities, forget about what your first instance is. You should try to approach the issue from a more public interest perspective. So the natural question that we should ask ourselves is that regardless of what the regulator thinks, is this a good thing for the community at large? And if it brings more advantageous benefits to the community than the sort of risks that it creates, and the risk can somehow be mitigated, then we mentioned just now guardrail, for example, then it seems that there's actually a case for you to take a more serious look at these innovative devices. So that's actually how the way we look at it. When these crypto things came up, we struggled quite a bit. Did it provide any value? Apart from the speculative things, people have been watching Bitcoin fluctuations, that's just one example. But if you try to see through all this, if you look at stablecoin, for example, then you can tell that actually it can also bring benefits to the real world. For example, if you look at the supply chain now, especially in the cross-border payment realm, then it could be pretty costly. It might involve multiple banks in the process, so every bank would take a cut of the transaction cost, and then there will be delay in the time the money can reach from the buyer to the seller. So all these sort of things, if we can have some payment tool which will cut down the payment speed from days or a number of days to just a few hours or even a few seconds, and if you can reduce the cost in relation to the cross-border payment, bring it down to at least half of it, then apparently there's some value in it to the society, to the corporates, to the households. So in that case, you should look at it from a slightly different perspective. If this is good, what sort of a risk that it brings with it? How big the risk is? And is there any way for you to put in a proper regime or regulatory framework where you actually provide a space for these kind of things to take off while managing the risk? I mean, it's a difficult task for us. We just passed a law last week or the week before. And I've been telling my team that, okay, now think about it. The very moment that you issue the first license is the beginning of your nightmare, because it means it's going to be an ongoing process, day in, day out, that you have to watch in terms of, well, will people get their money back? Give you $1 in exchange for $1 stablecoin, but if I want to redeem it, can you do it for me? How long it will take? And then can you keep my private key safely? And will there be any cyber attack? And that's just about some pretty routine operational matters relation to a stablecoin. But after all, if we can still build a system where through proper licensing and supervision, then the stablecoin issuers can still do their job and facilitate cross-border trade, for example, then that's a good thing. So my answer, a long way answering your question, is that, okay, sometimes we have to stand in the way because that's our job. But the thing is, you try to look at what might happen and you will see, well, if there's a way for me to just step aside, I put in something to safeguard the overall financial system, and okay, in that case, I'll probably just step back a bit, let it happen, instead of stepping in the way.
So I think the audience understands that when I summarized Nargiz's comments, they bore no relation to what she actually said. So just to be really clear. But Frank, maybe you want to pick up the point about technology, data, data standards, data privacy, data migration, how that impacts, right? Does that impact the pace of sustainable infrastructure development?
Yes, no, thank you. Because let me see it from a customer way, because Tencent has several many companies. You know, in the company that you use the computer, you use applications, anyway, right? But before that, they're using the monolithic system, right? For 6 years, we're using the computer, cloud technology, big data, or something like that. When we building our company for the cloud company, we found the cloud technology will improve the computer use very, very much. So a lot of customers has adopted kind of methodology to using computer to cloud technology. Foxconn is a very big company. They have 8 lighthouse factory, and the enterprise was using the Tencent technology to support all the corporation applications, office automation, and also they're using IDIN Cloud to support their plant, and the public cloud to the customers. So this cloud technology improve for Foxconn's cost efficiency and electricity consumption, better, very better. And also another example is we have some kind of a semiconductor customer. They using computer very loud because they are very conservative. So they also starting using the cloud computing technology. They found it very useful in making their production very reliable, very resilient, very scalable, and I think from this point of view, they making their data centers more productive and more cost reduction. Also, the energy consumption is breaking down. So I think this is one thing for the cloud computing technology using. And for one company, they operating efficiently. So if they operate efficiently, they will improve efficiency and also make things make all the society, if every enterprise using this kind of technology to improve their productivity, efficiency, all these kind of things. And also from data management system, data management point of view, because the company has a lot of data, This kind of data, how to get value out of data is key challenges for that. And before AI, they more focused on the business AI. Usually it's structured data and semi-structured data. But after AI, they are more focused on the unstructured data and maybe some kind of semi-structured data. After they using that, they will improve the operation very, very big. I think so that will. I think that result will balance the the AI consumption, the cost, also the AI, the energy consumption with their outcomes. In one way, they consume some energy, another way, they save some energy, these kinds of things. So, and before, also, every company has their own data centers. These data centers may be redundant, something, but we are pushing the customer using the public cloud, public data centers. So if they using the public cloud more, the data center becomes smaller. So it's more efficient in society, in all the company for serving all company. I think that's a Tencent way to, to make to make investment for the future, to serve the customer, to make all the society better, to using the energy. Yeah.
No, Frank, thank you. Just so you know, I've identified 2 people on this side and 2 people on this side who've had their heads buried in their phones for at least the last 5-10 minutes. I'm not going to say who those 4 people are, but we have 33 minutes left. I have ample opportunity to come to you with questions. So, but I have a question for Chinhua. So, hyperscale data centers. Okay. Can you share Keppel's perspective on it? But from the view of how do you do successful project management? So, I always think that implementation is where the magic happens. So, how do you connect the magic with technology and innovation and infrastructure?
Yeah, I think execution. You're right, Andrew. Execution is often key, and we take pride in executing our project on time, on budget. Easier said than done, especially when you're doing something. We're talking about data centers, but we are building currently a subsea cable linking the western part of the United States to Singapore. It runs about over 20,000 kilometers. It's a joint build with Meta of Facebook. The project is due for completion, ready for service sometime at the second half of this year. And so what we did was, when the project was first put together, we actually put a red team to look at it, because as I'm sure you often see in organizations, the team that proposes the project obviously will tend to see all the things that can go right. Of course, they do some risk management, they look at what could go wrong, but the fundamental interest is in promoting the project. So as a responsible institution, especially since we have LP's money involved, very early on in the project, we will get what we call a red team. So the red team's job is to basically poke holes on the project. And it's not really to say that we are not going to do the project, but it's really to kind of make the discussion more robust, so that when the time comes and we actually execute, hopefully we would have thought through more of the things that could have gone wrong. And the end result of which all is that, I think we were able to identify most, if not all, of the major risks, and we were able to mitigate them. And the project looks likely that it will be completed pretty much on time, on budget. Right? So coming back to, so that's the part on execution. Coming back to hyperscale, I think it's no longer just about building a data center. It's really about providing an ecosystem. And this is where we differentiate ourselves, that we are not just a data center player, but we are an ecosystem player. So what do I mean by that? We built, as I mentioned, subsea cables. So data centers by themselves, you can't do anything unless they're connected, right? So from continent to continent, countries to countries, you will need submarine subsea cables, fiber optic cables, to connect them. And then, of course, you need power. Most grids globally are congested. So you got to think about how do you find a solution. That was why I mentioned earlier about potentially looking at off-grid solutions, looking at even a microgrid using renewables. We are also looking at importing hydrogen. We are building the first hydrogen-ready power plant in Singapore. So these are things that will take time to build, but I think if you believe that this is the way forward, then you can put this together and you are able to then provide a solution that hyperscalers are looking for. So we signed a global strategic framework agreement with AWS last year to provide not just data centers, but also to provide subsea cables, both green and brown electrons, cooling as well. And so these are things that I think we feel is quite important. And particularly in the times that we have today where the world is increasingly fragmented, I think it's even more important that the world remains connected. And I think this is something that, Keppel is very involved in.
Nargis, I listened to you really carefully, and I think you made some very strong points about highlighting the differences between different regions and different states of the markets. So, sort of two questions for you, building on what you've heard from the other panelists. So, if you think about Central Asia, are there specific challenges that are very unique to Central Asia when it comes to infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, innovation in infrastructure? And, bless you, and AIB as a multilateral development bank, how should it work with Tencent? How should it work with HKMA? How should it work with Keppel? Because MDBs, by definition, are these very unique, quite odd creatures. We can migrate between many different partners. You've heard the panelists, so two questions. Is there something that's specific, unique, or is there things that are, the challenges are in common? And then how does an MDB work with very different partners to scale up, to make profitable, to find development impacts in innovation and infrastructure?
Yes, I think that the geography of this panel and the AIIB's operations is very different. And as I earlier mentioned, Singapore, Hong Kong, mainland China, fortunately for your part of the world, less fortunately for the rest of it, you seem to be a significant, I wouldn't say light years ahead, but definitely in terms of ambition and in terms of the ecosystems, you're much further. So going back to Central Asia, Caucasus, the Middle Corridor area, there are the issues and the problems there are much on a much earlier stage. One, of course, as I said, is lack of trust and certain political risks between the countries. The markets are small. The populations are much small than in your country, much smaller than in your country. So it only makes sense in terms of, so scaling up means how do you move from out of that valley of death, right? Well, how do you move when you're too mature for a VC and not big enough yet for an institutional investor, for a big investor? To make that, to get out of that valley of death, you need to provide the institutional investor, no matter how responsible the investor is. So I spent 7 years of my life working for the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Most of the investors like that want to do impact investment. They want to do green investment, infrastructural investment, but still, they do need to make sure that the investment is de-risked. And this is exactly when MDBs have a unique role. I can use an example. It's not exactly a tech investment, but one of the big investments in our part of the world was the Southern Gas Corridor, which may not be a conventional tech investment, but this was a perfect example how consensual funding by MDBs, all of them, EBRD, ADB, AIB, I think, had $600 million in a project. That was the anchor investment, and then you had the sovereign investment, and now together they raised $40 billion from the private banks and the private sector. So this was the case where without the roles of the role of the MDBs, this would have never happened. It would have been like one of the, I think there was one of the James Bond movies about a pipeline through our part of the world that was never meant to be. I have heard 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that this pipeline is a science fiction because it goes through so many geographies, so many regimes, so many different countries. So it takes a multilateral development bank to take at least the political risk and then obviously invite everyone else, and most importantly, mobilize that private capital, without which none of the real innovation and the real investment would happen.
So, Darryl, I'm going to pick that point up. So, if I said to you, so two different things. What does HKMA need from a multilateral development bank? And is the solution to all of this public-private partnerships? So sometimes that gets waived as the combination between, risk-taking by the public sector, incentivizing the private sector, a balance between the two. Very challenging, but is PPPs the answer, or is there something else that you need from an MDB? And I'll stretch the question. What do you need from a Keppel, and what do you need from a Tencent?
Well, I think, first of all, I still see great merits in having the kind of private-public partnership. First of all, we talked quite a bit about the MDBs, that the perspective they can bring in. But I think there's a couple of other things that having an MDB or in that relation, international organizations that also get involved in this kind of infrastructure projects. One is definitely the sort of governance that MDBs and all these public sector investors can bring to the project. Because for credible MDBs and international organizations, and even I think for sovereign wealth funds like the HKMA that we manage, you're pretty sure that whatever project they pick would have gone through very robust screening process. It's not just about the financial return, but it's a lot to do with the governance and what benefits it can bring to the community. It's not just purely return driven. So that's one thing. And in our case, for example, when we choose between two projects, risk-adjusted return similar, but one project has green or sustainable feature, then our priority will always go to the green project. And in terms of greenness, then definitely that there will be the need to have a big degree of scrutiny in choosing the project, and not just for the initial investment, but the follow through after you put your money into that project. So the governance, I think, is a hugely important thing that public sector investors can bring in. And the second thing is, I think for some of these international organizations, when they are involved, they also have the mandate of providing policy recommendations to the governments of the respective jurisdictions. And as we mentioned just now, some of the hindrance or obstacles is actually on the policy side. Whether they have the necessary environment or the policy to support these projects. And if you have a credible international organizations coming in, providing the policy advice and recommendations to the local government, that also helps in terms of making sure the project will proceed as intended. So that's another aspect of it. And the third is actually by pooling some of these MDBs and sovereign wealth investors, you sort of diversify the risk a bit. And that makes the project, through the de-risking, more bankable. It will be more attractive to private sector investors. More so if some of these public sector investors can actually provide some sort of a concessionary capital. So I still see great merit of marrying both public and private sector investors in a lot of these infrastructure projects. Now, in terms of what we can expect from Keppel and Tencent, then certainly I think it's not just about the money, but the idea, solutions that they can also bring to this kind of partnership. I think that's something that we should also very much value. So again, I mean, it's probably a pretty long answer to your question, but if I may say so, in terms of a collaboration with AIIB, I think it has been a very pleasant journey for us. In terms of previously we put together, together with some other MDBs, a project that will actually help transition in emerging Asia. So we want to see more substantive investment or taking place, or substantive projects being invested in. And one other thing that we will also want to explore with you is there a way for us to look at smaller VCs, for example, in coming up with some solutions? I know there's some ideas that are being approached. And when it comes to innovation, even in infrastructure, I don't think it has to be huge infrastructure. Sometimes you can just take some small improvements in the solutions to make it greener and more sustainable. So I'll just give you two examples that we invest in. One is a sort of it's a relatively small venture, but it provides solutions that enable a solar panel to keep track of the angles of the sun, so that it can actually make full use, optimize the capture of the sunlight for the solar energy. And another example is actually how to make the so-called re-steel more efficient in terms of production. And re-steel is something that you can actually reinforce the concrete structure. And it's this kind of small things that if you can bring in more innovative solutions that help you bring down the production costs and improve the efficiency, that will also contribute to the bigger infrastructure projects that you talk about.
Daryl, thank you. So just to warn the audience, I've got a question for Frank, and then I'm going to open it up to see if anybody's got a in a minute, but I've got you, and you, well, okay, excellent. But I'm just going to ask Frank just a quick question briefly. So Frank, pretend that you're not in a big room and pretend you can speak completely freely. Mm-hmm. And you were sitting down with these three people and you had to give them advice, candid, frank advice on how to implement AI technology successfully, so that they can either monetize it, gain efficiencies, or increase innovation within their organizations. And within this very safe environment, what would your frank advice be, Frank?
Okay. Yeah. You know, AI is expensive, right? AI is expensive. But the most challenging thing is how to pinpoint the use cases, how to find the high ROI cases is very very difficult. So in order to find that, you need end-to-end solution, from strategy, business planning, to business process improvement, optimization, and also you have to have a special implementation service. Actually, this kind of solution, the market for this kind of solution is very big. From recently industry analysis, this market will be 150 billion US dollars by a report from KPMG, and to find how to say, to get to that, the service partner, which in understanding the AI expertise and also the business process, business knowledge is very shortage. So you have to, maybe a lot of AI companies have AI expertise, but they don't know the business, don't know how to use it in the business, how to find the business cases. So for now, some of maybe some of partners, some of consulting service also transforming to AI, partners, but they are very slow. So I think maybe how to design this kind of a partnership, find a good partner to find the most ROI use cases is the first step, and then maybe we need some public incentive for the deployment side, not the supplier side. So if you find a good cases, a good, very measurable outcomes, very efficient, very outcome-based use cases, maybe we can invest for that and to find this one. And this is the first, I think, the first advice. Another one advice is when we try to use AI in company, in our use cases, there's two approaches. One approach is you train your own model. Another approach, you use the existing model. Actually, training your own model is very, very expensive. Expensive in the way of computing, power you need, and also the data you need. Because the large language model is very big. You need at least the data size match this kind of parameters, the data size, so you can train your own model. Otherwise, your data size, your data size is very small. It's not you cannot, the training result is not so evident, not so clearly. So usually I would advise you use the existing model, a lot of existing model here, and also the model capability is very good now. So using the existing model, using the agentic way to serve you. Usually for small cases, to find the special cases, like some kind of we are now using the knowledge sharing cases, also the surveys, customer surveys cases, very clear ROIs, because in the customer service, we're using the AI, will reduce a lot of cost. Sometimes we reduce the people serving the customer. Yeah, so that's the two advice for how to use AI. Yeah.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather a whole bunch of questions, and then I'm going to allow the panelists to pick the ones that they feel they can offer a useful and appropriate answer to. So I don't know if we've got a microphone in the room, but I can do it. Oh, so if you could go round, and I'll take 5 questions. So if another 4 people can quickly stand up, put their hands up. So a good question is a concise question.
Yeah, I've got a question to Daryl Chen, Mr. Daryl Chen. Stablecoins and RWA are very hot topic in Hong Kong and globally. Guotai became the first security firm in China to upgrade their license, and their stock price today has skyrocketed almost 200%. So I guess the question is, how do you strike a balance between the benefits and also the risk of this trend? And secondly, more specifically, what steps is Hong Kong MA is taking to foster the secondary market liquidity of these type of assets, so that more and more investors can enjoy the flexibility, efficiency, and also the liquidity of these type of assets, which is especially the sustainable infrastructure. Because there are already two live cases, right? One is the EV charger assets, and the other is solar residential storage assets in this market.
Do you mind?
The question
you.
I have
Yeah.
just finished.
And Daryl, I'll get all the questions and then thank you. If you want to pass over, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. With the development of artificial intelligence and a new app called Cursor, even people who don't know programming, they can also create an app or a website, just know how to input the prompt. So maybe in the future, there will be less and less programmer, product manager, and operation staff in the future. So I wonder how long will it take for this to happen in our real life, in 2 or 3 years, or 5 to 10 years, and how can we improve our competitiveness in our future career? Thank you.
Great. Who's next? I saw a few other hands.
So thanks for sharing of insight. And as Nargis has mentioned, like we have like scattering like sustainable infrastructures around the globe, as well as for the scattering and diverse ESG assessment scales like provided by different data providers. So my question is like in reality, when we're assessing a project or a company's like ESG score where it's like dynamics, apart from the alternative data we could get, like most of them are based on the self-exposed on their ESG report, on their financial reports. So like I have a question to Frank and towards each of the panelists, like how what tool do you use to transform those like natural languages into a more scalable financial data sets for
Thank
our
you.
ESG
So
assessment?
another question, the gentleman here, and then I've got time for one more.
So my question is just simple. So as we saw here, so the Keppel, so there's such a big company, Tencent, and then my question, the SIMS, if you follow up the SIMS, invest in the future. So these companies in the future, like in next decade, they're gonna invest in invest in which the technology such as like AI or if like AI or IoT devices or real on time. So what they expect, and then what is the between these technologies? What is the like advantages and disadvantages of like applying in this industry? So that's it.
Thank you. And then the last question here, and then I'll go down the panel, starting with you, Chunhwa FMA, and then Darren Nargis, and then Frank. Last question, please.
All right, I have a question about cross-border data security, data flows. So Nargis just mentioned that restraint on cross-border data flow could pose an obstacle to cooperation on infrastructure investment. So I just want to hear the panelists' opinion on how this issue should be dealt with. Are you optimistic that this could be dealt with quite quickly, so we can expect to see enhanced flow of cross-border data flow with enhanced efficiency, or the security concern could remain a major issue for some time to come?
Thanks very much.
Oh, maybe I'll take the last question. I think data sovereignty is here to stay. So the way that Keppel looks at it is that going forward, we will have to be, doing more data centers in country to support, whatever data center needs are. Does it impinge on, efficiency in terms of? It definitely, I believe it will, but this is part of the world that we live in now, that we are increasingly winding back on globalization, and things are going to cost more because you can't produce at the cheapest location because of various considerations. So I think this is the real world that we live in now. So we just have to find ways to navigate that. And I'm sure there will also be opportunities that will come out of that. So that's how we look at it.
Very quickly on the stablecoin issue, I think for us that balance is actually, if I can find a magic word for that, it would be the user case. So whenever we look at a so-called stablecoin scheme or issuance scheme, then the first question for us is not about the technical part of it or how they manage the risk. That's the sort of baseline that we have to fulfill anyway. But what differentiates among different stablecoin schemes would be what would be the actual use case. It's not for the sake of issuing a stablecoin, but how you can actually use the stablecoin in a particular way. And is that scalable? Will that help you actually bring enough revenue to cover your cost? Because we are also worried that if you can't make money out of it, then people tend to do funny things. So I think the use case is something that very important to us. The second point about secondary trading, this is an area that we should really be looking at very seriously. In Hong Kong, our securities regulator is now actually, they have some plan as to how we might be able to promote more secondary trading. But I think as far as the HKMA is concerned, I think one of the things that may be seen as a hindrance on the secondary trading is the lack of a credible money lake. Which is why for every kind of trading in the crypto, you've got the asset, but also you need the money. The money lake now is not so well developed, which is why I think stablecoin will be able to fill one of these possibility. Then we can also have tokenized deposit issued by banks, for example. So what we need is actually to fill that gap as well from the money lake. But overall, it's really the market ecosystem, people whether they will really feel interested in the particular kind of product and the volatility, to what extent you can actually reduce it, and also the market depth and the number of people that actually participate in the market.
I will answer the last question as well, and this time I'll do it with my AIIB hat, because as Andrew said, I'm also a member of International Advisory Panel. I am optimistic because the institutions like AIIB put it in their corporate strategy, and there is a genuine commitment to increase the cross-border project infrastructural, digital infrastructural projects. I am optimistic that these problems and these bottlenecks can be overcome because, you know, you have known unknowns and unknown unknowns. We know that there is a problem. We know that there is a trust issue. We know there are cyber threats. I think as long as you know about a hindrance, and as long as you are committed to overcome it, and as long as you have your eye on the ball, on the goal, on the benefit of doing it, I'm very concerned about the fragmentation that we are observing lately. You know, organizations like the ASEAN and the European Union did not get created for nothing. I am a big believer in globalization, and I think this is what multilateral development banks are going to play a big role in.
Okay. You know, Tencent is a software company. No matter they tend to have the 2 million servers. So I ask in the software way because, you know, software define everything. You know, you personally need software, enterprise needs software, society needs software. Also, the infrastructure also needs software. So in the future, we will use software to improve all the efficiency also. And for now, we talk about a lot of AI, okay? AI consume a lot of energy, consume a lot of power, everything. But AI is software. But after AI, maybe sometimes some future, AI will be a hardware, maybe a chip. And after that, this chip will consume less more power. So, this chip, on this chip will also some kind of software, new software. You know, now we chat with the AI, right? But in the future, maybe we not chat with the AI. AI is everywhere. You pop on the screen, pop on your computer. You don't have to chat with them. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have two last jobs to do. One is that I have to somehow summarize what we've just heard. So I will be the one person that fails on the panel because I think it's actually impossible to summarize all the content. So failure of the panel is on me in terms of being able to summarize what was discussed. The second point, though, I would like to make is, I think you've just seen 4 very accomplished professionals at work who have actually supplied you with incredibly astute and wise answers. And so, really big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the AIIB annual general meeting.